Did you know that DNA evidence is not always correct? I didn't either until I read page 274 of this book, Fatal Invention by Dorothy Roberts. Turns out there are 3 different ways that this can happen. Come with me. First is the stupidest, and it's just human error. Let me read you a quote from 270. But DNA is not infallible. The genetic material in government databases, that's part of the third one, has to be retrieved, transferred, transported, identified, labeled, analyzed, and stored by human hands, and there is opportunity for error at every stage. So, as stupid as it is, sometimes the justice system just fucks up because it's run by humans, but that's the least compelling of the 3. You can read more about it here on page 270, the example of 2003 Houston Police Department. Really dumb stuff was happening, like samples getting contaminated, and lots of convictions had to get called into question. The second one, overconfidence in the objectivity of DNA. Even though DNA evidence is not perfect, jurors have a tendency to find it extremely convincing. So much so that in 2009, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that prisoners have no constitutional right to post-conviction testing of DNA samples that might prove their innocence. Once the test is done, cannot retest. What is that about? This can matter tremendously because, as she discusses all over the rest of the book, DNA models are statistical models. Lil Wayne, for instance, got convicted and there were fewer than 13 matching sites. I'm not an expert on DNA myself, but that's not necessarily the highest confidence. And if your intuition is to quibble with me on whether or not that's enough base pairs, like, cool, good luck with your Wikipedia search. I wonder if you're more of an expert than the multiple bioethicists that are cited on page 74. But there's another one, which is hyper-surveillance or over-surveillance. This is a theme that we have discussed in Ruha Benjamin's work. She opens with the helicopters over her house in both of her books. We've also discussed it with regard to Safiya Noble's work, but let's break down why this matters, because not everybody is in the genetic database, and that is a problem. When you take a DNA sample from a crime scene, you have to check it against other DNA samples that are in the databases. But who is in those databases? Spoiler alert, 8.5 by 11 colored folks with a lot of caucasity are less likely to be in those datasets. Why? Because we're less likely to be over-policed. That matters. In the UK, for instance, 40% of black men had genetic profiles compared to only 6% of white men. Please read more about this. This book is worth your time for so many reasons. So human error, overconfidence in statistical methods, and an injustice in who is even in the genetic databases means that DNA testing is not infallible. Happy reading.